So let's make a start. So my first question for you, Ed, is please
Yeah.
can you tell us a little bit about your time at school? So when were you at Millfield? What were your interests? That sort of thing.
I've got to try and remember. I went to Millfield probably, I think it's 1993. Seems a long time, but it is a long time ago. And I was showing around Millfield. My dad took me around and it looked like a really good school. I applied for a scholarship there and was very lucky and got one. And then, obviously turned up at Millfield, as everyone does on the first day of term. And this is my first time away from being, my first time being away from home. And so I'd never boarded in my life. And I was at Shapwick House, and Mr. Duran was the house parent. And I can remember that obviously we had no mobile phones. So there was no ringing home. You had to wait to use a pay phone that was downstairs. There were two actually in that house at the time. You had to wait your turn. And so that was just across from the campus and still is. And I think I remember the first thing that I was struck by was all the amazing sort of sculptures and stuff that were around Millfield and how it was more like a university campus than anything else. I think subjects I really enjoyed were obviously the art and the fantastic art block, which I think was relatively new when I went. How those rooms let so much light in, and it really helped sort of captivate the imagination, and obviously the rolling countryside up to Glastonbury Tor.
Do you think that's where your passion stemmed from, Ed? Do you think Millfield is where you sort of really learned that you were passionate about art and engineering? Or do you think it's sort of something that was instilled in you from a really young age, pre-Millfield?
Well, I was always interested in taking things apart. My parents would keep me occupied by giving me broken things, or sometimes accidentally letting me get my hands on things that worked. Even at a young age, I was pretty good with a screwdriver, so I would just basically take various things apart and work out how they were made and work out what bits made what lights go on and things like that. And my mum was very hands-on, so she was very good at DIY, and so I would help. I think we ripped out a kitchen when I was 3 years old, and so we were always sort of we were like a team almost, you know. We would get together and build things and make things, and she'd show me how to do the sort of the basics that you need at that age, and it sort of progressed from there. And then Millfield was really just a chapter in that story. But what it did do is it showed you how it fitted into into work, if you like. So, you know, design communication, what does that mean? What does graphics mean? What does well, we didn't have sort of necessarily computer science at all back then, but you could certainly see the bits that were beginning to form to build what those core subjects are today. And I think really Millfield was very good at, I said a bit about this just before, but it was very good at identifying the areas where you had sort of perhaps a natural capability, but it taught you to look at it in a different way. And it showed, I think, for the first time in my life, how close a lot of these subjects are.
It's quite interesting because I think a lot of people sort of feel like Millfield really brought out what they were interested in and was quite an integral sort of stepping stone for what they then went on to do post Millfield. So it's interesting to hear you talk about that. Brings me on to my next question slightly, which is, what's your favourite memory of your time at Millfield?
One fantastic memory was I was well, I don't know how Shapwick is configured these days. I was downstairs and the view out of my dorm window looked over Glastonbury Tor, and one drizzly morning, Tuesday morning or something like that, when nothing particularly interesting was happening and I was feeling sort of rather, I don't know, probably a bit homesick, I want to go home, and you know, I didn't have anything sort of massively interesting lined up that week, and I thought I must you know, find some sort of positive thing. And I mean, it was good. It's just one of those moments that you have on a dull Tuesday morning. And just as I thought that, I looked out the window and the red arrows flew straight over and they broke formation around Glastonbury Tor and then rejoined. And I just thought, there's so much out there. There's so much to go and do. And it kind of like, that was the highlight for that term, I think.
So Ed, after Millfield, you went on to work for Dyson, and you spent 11 years working for Dyson. You did designing, inventing, and you also did lots of managing of projects. Yeah. Was there a particular high point at your career at Dyson?
Basically, Dyson had bought the world's oldest working jet engine, which was developed by Frank Whittle, Sir Frank Whittle, and I knew his son. That's right, I know his son. And basically, I sat at my desk one day, and I saw this engine being wheeled past, and I was like, "That's a Whittle engine." And I was amazed, because I thought, you know, I know the guy who's the son of the guy who invented that. So I sent James an email and said, "Hey, have you just bought this jet engine?" He said, "Yeah, I've got this jet engine." I said, "How would you like Sir Frank Whittle's son to come and fire it up?" And he said, "Well, that sounds amazing. Do you know him?" I was like, "Yeah, I'll introduce you to him." So Frank Whittle's son came down his airplane, and I went up to Kemble Airport, and basically met him there. And he said, "How would you like to fly my plane around the 7 bridges?" So I was like, "Yeah, okay." So that was great. So I sat next to, you know, legend himself, and got to fly his airplane around the 7 bridges, and then did a fly past over Dyson with the engine and various stuff. In fact, I'll send you the photograph that we took, because it's pretty cool. And that was over the building, and it had the jet engine outside, and the Harrier in the car park, as you do. And then we landed, and then we went outside into the car park, and we fired it up in the car park. And it was the world's oldest working jet engine, sort of been fired into life in the car park, full of sort of geeky engineers and bystanders and watchers, and then loads of people came up to turned up to come and see it. It was just a fantastic experience, and I remember that.
That is amazing. That is such a great story. I did a bit of research before this interview about Dyson, because I was just interested to see, you know, their products and what they do. And I read this amazing article, and it was saying that actually there are people who are paid as their job to look at a product and find a way to improve it. And if they work for a year and they find one tiny improvement, say on a Hoover, you know, improve the suction, it's a success. And something that stuck with me from last time when I met you at Millfield is you said to me that some of your best ideas came from 10 of you sitting in a room eating donuts, and you'd sort of bounce ideas off each other. And I thought that was amazing. And certainly when you were just talking about the jet engine, that brings me on to my next question, which is you are also a pilot. So where does that stem from? How do you have time to fit that in as well? And did it come from you working on jet engines at Dyson that led you to that career path?
No, it's how did that start? I've always had an interest in flying. Ever since I was, you know, it's like 3-year-old dream kind of thing. You know, Mummy, Daddy, I'm going to go be an astronaut. And they're like, "No, you're not. You're probably going to go and be, I don't know, work in a bank or something." I don't know, one of those things. And I was always fascinated by it. And we had an airfield that was very close to us called Old Sarum. I got my pilot's license before I could drive. So I knew flying came sort of before driving in some aspects, and it was a bit weird because my driving instructor would have to, at the end of a driving lesson, have to drop me off at the airfield so that I could go and fly, because obviously I can't drive the car by myself. So he'd always time it to finish at Old Sarum, which was quite funny. And then we had to make this quick transition from going from a car to fly an airplane. And then obviously sort of Dyson happened, and that was for 11 years, and so there wasn't really much flying there. Not certainly not sort of when I was in China, because I can't just go and rent an airplane and go and do that. And so that all happened, and then when I came back from China, I really wanted to sort of see that. I wanted to take it to the next step. So whilst at Dyson, I studied my commercial exams, and then that basically gives you a ticket to then go and fly anything. Pretty much, you can go and fly a 747 with the type rate rating, And very fortunately, I got offered a job at Bristol flying these wonderful machines, and I love flying. It's part of my blood.
My next question is, obviously you at the moment, you're still flying and you're still doing your creating machines and art as well. So where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? What do you see yourself doing? Will you go down a particular a path, one of those three, or do you think you'll continue to do it all?
I will continue to do it all. They are all very close to me. They all they are as important as each other, and flying is my main job. That is sort of that is my sort of what's the best way to say that is my employment, if you like. So the next step is to hopefully progress my career through that, and that I see is very, very important. And the other stuff is a bit more manageable, so it can fit in and around that. But where I would really like to see stuff, I guess from some of the stuff that I create perspective, is the sculptures. I kind of, I do them for fun, but they've become quite serious. I get sort of fairly big commissions, and so the art sort of side, I really want to explore new materials and various things like that. The main thing is the drive for Genesis 2. So it has successfully sort of molded all existing types of plastic in one go without having to sort it, which is, as far as I know, a world first. And what I would like to see that do is be able to take more materials, so not have to differentiate between, let's say, a recycled carpet, a chair, a part of a car, and be able to build that into products which are meaningful, stuff that has a place and a use on our planet, but also be made into this composite that it makes, where it can be broken down again and reused, and just use more intelligently more of what we've got. And I'd like to see Genesis sort of everywhere, really. I'd like to see it for a start around the UK, and for us not to have to worry about sort of, oh, can we put this film in that box, or is that recyclable or is it not? I want the word recyclable removed, only basically because I want everyone to look at everything and never have to even guess whether it's recyclable. Everything can be recycled, and I am a great believer in that. I think everything can be recycled. I just think that we need to apply more to innovation and technology to be able to uncover those things.
We can strive for that, can't we? Let's hope.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah.
5-10 years time, like you say, it doesn't, the word recycle, everything should be. Which brings me on to your face masks. So during the pandemic, you created the world's first fully recyclable face mask, face shield.
Yes.
You created Foldle.
Yes.
What was your motivation behind that, and how did it all start?
It started because basically I was aware that there was this virus in China, in Wuhan, and it was spreading around China, and they were locking a lot of places down. So I was aware that it was happening, and I remember sort of seeing various images of people wearing a lot of PPE, personal protection equipment, goggles, masks, and these shields. And I thought, this is quite serious. And then obviously it jumped to another country, and then before we knew it, it was a pandemic. But whilst that was kind of happening, we were having a few cases over here, but it wasn't massive. And I was talking to some friends who were based in London, who were doctors and frontline medical workers, and they said they didn't have really any PPE. And I said, well, what do you mean? To what extent? And they said, well, the face shields, we're going to Ryman's and we're buying overhead projector film, and we're attaching it to whatever headgear they had, and like with staples and stuff. I was like, that's just crazy. And so a lot of the machines that I had, which were making prototype components for this Genesis 2 product, the recycling machine, were sat idle, and they weren't really making the bits for it, because everything has to be sort of made in a certain sequence, and certain engineering companies, which I need help from to make specialized components for it, were obviously furloughed, so they couldn't. So these machines were sat idle, and so I put them to work in making 3D printed components and various other components to make a basic face shield, but made out of materials which are readily available, so that as long as this production could be scaled up, we could basically facilitate the need and demand of face shields in the country. And they sort of grew hand in hand, and it went from sort of me downstairs in my basement, in my lab, to 360 people in about, I think it's about 3 weeks.
I mean, it was amazing. It was an incredible initiative, and it was so needed at the time as well. You know, to hear how people were creating PPE.
Yeah.
I mean, not only is it not safe, but it's also mental that in 2020, in a first world country, that we were having to do that. I followed it closely during the pandemic, and it was amazing to see one of our RMs doing something like that and giving back to the community and just helping at a time where help was so desperately needed. So yeah, I think it was amazing.
Thank you.
My next question is, so you recently hosted a talk at Millfield, which was all about Genesis 2. What advice would you give to our students, or what advice would you give to yourself at their age, sort of, you know, 15, 16, 17? What advice would you give them for the future?
Never be scared of breaking something that we I guess not, I'm not going to say break a rule, but never be scared of doing something and it not being successful, because the success is in it failing. And so I would say to any 16, 17, 18-year-olds is, don't get upset when something doesn't work, because that is the most important thing. Actually, when it works is not really important. It's what you've learned to get there, because you will use those bits which are the elements of what you see are the failure in what you're trying to do. But those elements of failure or mistakes will be really, really useful in another project. They will be the guiding light in another project. They will be the sort of the shining beacon, the golden path. And so don't take it to heart. Don't get upset.
And my final question for you, Ed, is please can you describe Millfield in 3 words?
Yeah, I think what I would say is, and this needs to kind of be put in context, but if Millfield did something for me, it invented my rulebook. And what I mean by that is, we are given rules. We are, you know, as we go through education, we work out what we're good at, what we're not very good at. And it's very important to have your own rule book, and know your own limits. Know what can make you crash, know what can make you go really fast, know what makes you happy, and also know about what areas you can really push and where you can be innovative and well versed in certain areas, or whatever that may be. In, you know, it might be even just be helping other people to get there, which is so important. And so from that aspect, I think Millfield to me showed me how I could invent my rule book and where I was good at, where I could push myself, and where rules were actually just a little bit silly, because they were sort of commonplace and they were there and have a historical value, whatever. But yeah, so I would say Millfield, its key sort of thing that it gives you is it allows you to invent your rule book.